Hi, I'm Steve Dennis. I'm Head of Business Development for BASF in the UK and Ireland. We've come through a period where farmers have really had to struggle with blackgrass control. Blackgrass populations are becoming more difficult to control and they're becoming more geographically spread, as well as the density increasing in a lot of farms. But finally, things are beginning to look a little bit brighter. Because of good cultural and rotational controls that farmers have been introducing, because of the whole use of IPM for control of blackgrass, but also because of the new introduction of new and exciting chemistry like Luximo from BASF, things are starting to look a little bit brighter for blackgrass control. So the really exciting thing coming up with new chemistry is that we've actually got a new mode of action coming as well. We've been relying on the same chemistry for many years, even decades now. We've got different types of chemistry in the market that's got different attributes, but it's always exciting to have something new. But that also brings us some great opportunities to be able to vary the chemistry we're using and to allow us to control strains that other chemistries are struggling to control. But let's have a think about what we should be considering when we put together a blackgrass control strategy. For blackgrass control, the key factors is managing numbers. There's two aspects to this. We need to reduce our blackgrass population because we need to reduce the competition that's in the crop. If we don't control our blackgrass, we will not maximise the profit that the farmer achieves. But equally, if we're not reducing the blackgrass population to around about 97%, we're not reducing the population in the seed bank in the field. If we're leaving more blackgrass than that, we're actually returning too much seed to the seed bank and we're leading to a higher population in future years. So it's clearly a numbers game for blackgrass control. The key challenge as part of this numbers game is to make sure that we're controlling resistant populations to at least the same degree that we're controlling the sensitive populations. If we leave 20% of the blackgrass population but we're only controlling the sensitive ones, then that 20% seed return will all be resistant population. And then we're just increasing our problem as we come into future years. So whatever approach we do, it needs to be designed to kill the resistant individuals as well as the sensitive ones. The other part to this numbers game is the yield impact. And for every one blackgrass plant per square metre we leave, we can actually reduce yield of that crop by 1%. So as I said already, it's all about numbers. We've got to achieve the highest control we can achieve without driving towards resistance. The best way to achieve this control, to actually get down the numbers of resistance individuals as effectively as we get down the sensitive individuals, is by using cultural control. This means the methods that we can do to reduce the population before we use in-crop herbicides. So this could be delayed drilling, for example. The later we drill our crop, the less blackgrass emergence we have. It also gives us the opportunity to create stale seed beds, thereby allowing blackgrass to germinate, and then we can use lower risk herbicides such as glyphosate to reduce the population. Another technique we can use is rotation, putting more emphasis on spring cropping, because spring cropping is ultimately the greatest delayed drilling that we can do. This allows us to use glyphosate before we drill, but it also means that we get a lower emergence as well in the spring. And a lot of growers have used techniques such as this to really start to get on top of their blackgrass population. But there is only so far that we can go by using these cultural methods. Ultimately, if we're going to grow these crops, we still need to be able to control the blackgrass we have in the crop. And that means, of course, using herbicides. Now, there's two types of blackgrass herbicides that we can think of. There's some high-risk blackgrass herbicides and there's lower risk ones. And we're talking risk here in terms of resistance development. And the real skill is to be able to achieve as much in-crop control of blackgrass as we can by only using those herbicides that have the lower risk to blackgrass resistance development. Once we've drilled our winter wheat crop, now we have to rely on in-crop herbicides to achieve control of the blackgrass. There are one or two other techniques we need to think about as well. For example, hand roguing to reduce blackgrass where it comes through. And another one which can be very valuable is a zero tolerance effect, where you see blackgrass coming through with your crop. You manage that by spraying those areas off, destroying them with glyphosate. Again, this is an example of watching out for a numbers game. If you see any blackgrass, deal with it. In terms of in-crop herbicides, we've got two basic groups of chemistry, and we can consider those low-risk herbicides in terms of resistance development and higher-risk herbicides. The lower-risk herbicides tend to be less of an all-or-nothing resistance, more of a reduction in performance that occurs over many years. And gradually, as years go by, the performance that we achieve with those herbicides gradually reduces. Whereas the higher risk herbicides tends to be much more black and white, much more of an all or nothing effect, and the resistance to those can develop much more quickly as well. So again, like with using IPM approaches, like with using cultural control, it's better to use the lower risk herbicides before we use the higher risk herbicides. Now, the lower risk herbicides tend to be the pre-em type herbicides. And we've been used in an industry, we've been used to using pendimethalin, we've been used to using flufenicet. These are the key active ingredients in this sector. We've got others such as trialate, prosulfocarb, have a role to play there as well, diflufenacan, picolinophen. These are all useful additions as well. And the good news is we've got a new mode of action with Luximo that's coming into this class as well. So the higher control we can achieve using this chemistry, the better. But we need to use them correctly. And that means using them as early in the life of the crop as you can. They're more effective when they're used pre-emergence. Most of these products can still be used in a post-emergent slot, but actually the performance drops as time goes on. If you've got any insensitivity at all to these herbicides, the smaller the plant is when it is sprayed, the more effective the performance is. And that means most of all going pre-emergence of the weed. So we've reduced our blackgrass population quite effectively now by using a number of low-risk techniques. We've used cultural controls, we've used all the IPM tools in our almary, we've thought about rotational things as well. And then once we've established the crop, we've used low-risk chemistry in a pre-emergent situation. And if everything has gone to plan, we will now have reduced our population very, very significantly. And in some situations, that may be enough. We may now have achieved sufficient control that we do not have to employ the higher risk chemistry types. This is really helpful if we can do this, because the more years we can get away without using those higher risk chemistry on our more difficult fields, the slower it will take for resistance to develop to those herbicides. But there will be situations where we need to use these higher risk herbicides. These are the more contact type herbicides that you'll be familiar with. ALS inhibitors, ACCAs inhibitors, things that you use within the crop, standing crop, to actually achieve blackgrass control. As we said earlier, these herbicides tend to have more of a black and white type resistance. Rather than a gradual development, we find that the resistance develops much more rapidly. And actually it gets quite quickly to the point where they're of no value within the crop at all. That's why we need to protect them. So when you're using them, again, use them in a way to manage numbers. We need to get numbers down as far as we can. As much as possible, only use them in mixture with other active ingredients rather than on their own. And use all stewardship approaches you can to protect them. Make sure you're using them under good conditions. Make sure you achieve good spray coverage and follow the manufacturer's recommendations. So to control blackgrass in a sustainable way, it brings together two factors. There's the farm profitability question and there is the resistance management. But the good news is both of these drive us to the same end. It's a numbers game. We need very high levels of control to maximise profit, but we also need to minimise the blackgrass seed return for resistance management. So we need high control from both sides. So use all the techniques that are available. Use the cultural control, use the rotational control, and then use the chemistry in a sustainable way to achieve the best performance on your farm.
BASF. We create chemistry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to everybody who has joined us for one or two or all three of our sessions today. We hope you enjoyed Steve Dennis's Resistance Masterclass. Just to introduce myself, my name is Ali Richards. I am the campaign manager for cereal herbicides for BASF. And to introduce the two panelists today, we've got Steve Dennis, who you just heard from. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Ali. Hi, everyone.
And Stuart Kivas, who is Business Development Manager for cereal herbicides for BASF. Afternoon, Stuart.
Afternoon, Ali. Hi.
So a little bit of a different session today, a little bit shorter and a little bit more kind of specific on the resistance management topic. We do have a couple of questions that have been asked, and I would just encourage anybody who is with us this afternoon, please don't, there is no such thing as a stupid question here. I think this is a topic with lots of nuances and lots of work ongoing with. So if you've got any questions, they will, the guys will try and answer them as best as they possibly can. So don't be shy. I think what I'll do first is I actually have some questions myself. I think I'll go first this time. I usually leave my questions to the end. Just a couple of questions. So, Steve, Stuart, you've been around in the industry for a while. I won't say how long, but from you and your experiences, what do you think has been fundamental to this increased resistance we have seen over the last 10 years, maybe longer?
I'll go first because I'm slightly younger in the industry than Steve. He can go further back. I think we mentioned it in the webinar we had earlier this morning. Getting set in ways and doing the same thing year in, year out, which is an easy thing to do when you know the profitability of the crop. You know how to get the yield that you want from the wheat crop, particularly wheat. So you do the same year in, year in. But blackgrass, as we said before, adapts quite easily, quite quickly to the same thing time after time after time. I think if you go back 20 to 30 years, continuous wheat was obviously one of the big problems and issues in that, developing more and more blackgrass into our winter wheat crops. in the last 10 years, what we've really seen is the increase in resistance to the contact type material, the ALS type material. That has really ramped up in the last 10 years as well. So seeing the loss of the effectiveness of that material, which has then really put a strong reliance now on the soil residual chemistry to carry the chemical burden of herbicide control. But we're reinforcing, and the industry is reinforcing, all those cultural control IPM measures that aren't necessarily that new, been around a long time, but reinforcing the value that they bring in the overall weed management.
Yeah, I think Stu touched on it there. Diversity is good, isn't it, in whatever we're doing? And I think as an industry, going back over a lot of years, we've become less diverse in what we've done. Use of herbicides does not lead to the generation of resistance, but it does lead to the selection of resistance. So as we've come to more simpler rotations, continuous cropping, continuous use of very similar chemistry, different chemical active ingredients, but with similar modes of action. All of these things are reducing the diversity, and it actually created an environment which has favoured selection for specific genetic types within the blackgrass population. So overall, I think that sort of movement down to a few crops and a few chemistries actually is the main reason why it's developed significantly over the past generation or so.
Great, thanks guys, great answers. So another question we've got from Alice Dyer here. So lots of mention of glyphosate, and we did speak about that in our webinar earlier today as well. So what sort of situation would we be in from a resistance management perspective if we lost this tool?
Yes, I think there's one thing there on Alice's question in preventing resistance. I don't think you can prevent resistance. Blackgrass mutates naturally. It's always going to adapt. Herbicides don't necessarily always drive actually that mutation. What we're trying to do is try and delay it for as long as possible with different active ingredients. Glyphosate has been an invaluable tool in terms of delayed drilling, stale seedbed, encourage a chit, kill that chit off before you grow the next crop. And glyphosate is a nice, easy tool to allow farmers to do that. Could you still do that without glyphosate? Well, probably yes, but it just would be a lot more time consuming, probably more passes, more fuel burnt, etc. You'd have to cultivate more, turn soil more, so but you could still destroy that chit on the surface before drilling. Then what else? There are other, we talked a bit about potentially robotics in the future coming in, and they might have a place to play to be able to take out blackgrass chit in the stale seed bed. Or there may potentially be alternatives, chemical alternatives to glyphosate might come down the line as well. So there are a lot of potential. So I think even though it's a very, very useful, easy tool for us at the moment, and it would be a big loss if it did go, I think we could probably work our way around.
I mean, we're used to losing tools, aren't we? If there's one thing we've become good at, I would say, over recent years, is as things go, we find, as an industry, we find solutions to do it. By nature, people are adaptive, aren't they? I think who work in the farming environment. Stu's absolutely right. It allows us, glyphosate allows us to establish and grow cereal crops in a certain way, and we would have to adapt that if glyphosate went. I think the other thing that has been a real value for glyphosate is being able to where populations have been left that are too high for roguing, we've been able to spray out patches of fields to get on top of that population. And I think that would be quite a loss as well, because there's no other way realistically of doing that at the moment. So that, I think, would be another big loss. But we would adapt, wouldn't we? We'd find ways of doing it.
Yeah, or we'd have to. So another question from Alan Horgan, who's saying, do you think adjuvants have a part to play in the resistance approach?
That's an interesting question. It might depend on what adjuvants you're using and what you're trying to pair them with, and what you think that adjuvant is actually bringing and doing. The soil residual chemistry, actually, the active ingredients are all different. They've all got different properties and how they interact with the soil. Some bind better, some are a little bit more mobile. So what that actual adjuvant is trying to do with those with that soil residual chemistry, is it trying to spread it better in the droplets so that you get a better coverage across the soil, so you're getting more even coverage of your active ingredient. The better coverage you have, the more chance you've got of your active ingredient hitting the blackgrass seed. Really, as we sort of said, these days, the high level of resistance we have to the post-em material, that post-em material is less effective now. Adjuvant won't really help that suddenly become more effective, penetrating and sticking onto that weed leaf surface. Nothing alters the binding site and what's actually going on chemically inside the weed plant to make it work more effectively against a resistant population. So it's a little bit understanding probably what you're trying to achieve with the adjuvant and what you're pairing it with.
I think if I look at the sentiment, I think is behind Alan's question there. I assume you're talking about adjuvants that you would buy separately and add in to the tank, because of course every product you buy will be formulated with a range of adjuvants in it to achieve the best performance for that active ingredient. So there are already adjuvants in that can when you buy it. And anything that actually improves the performance of the herbicide is going to improve the resistance management, because we've just heard the higher the kill we achieve, the better for resistance management. So if your adjuvant is able to do that, then I would say definitely it is a help. I think the watch out is where we use adjuvants to reduce the dose rate of the herbicide. And we're thinking that by using a low cost adjuvant, we can actually spend less on herbicides. That is the danger area, I would say, because the chances are you are not getting the level of herbicide you need for the efficient kill from that product. So if we're using them to enhance performance, then certainly why not? I don't see a negative to that. If we're using them to take some chances, if you like, to actually reduce in certain situations, then I would say there's a risk attached to that.
Thanks both, and Alan, I hope that's answered your question, but feel free to add into the chat and we can revisit it. Now, James has snuck in 2 questions for the price of 1, but he has apologised for it, so we will let him off, and I'll ask both of these questions. So the first question is, how do you think minimal till affects the weed seed population in the soil? And the second question is, what technology that is just over the horizon that is going to make the next major difference to weed control? So first question, how do you think minimal till affects the weed seed population in the soil?
That's an interesting question. I think there's probably work being done by our independent institutes looking into that. So that's also a question worth posing to those guys and getting their response to that as well. it will change the dynamics a little bit. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be burying the seed at all. So the seed stays on or close to the surface. I think conversations I've had with growers who are getting on top of their blackgrass pressure and have been min-till is it's a journey. It takes a time. It's not a sudden, you min-till 1 year and that's it. All your blackgrass is gone. It's taken them quite a time to get to that position, and having their whole sort of system set up to work towards that and get the best out of it. So it's certainly with these guys, and it has really helped them get that blackgrass pressure back down and lower. My answer to the second part of the question, I'm going to take the easy win here, and say, we have a new mode of action in Luximo coming to the market. So that is new technology. It is a new mode of action. It does increase the diversity of mode of actions available to the grower, and it's a fairly effective one as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stuart. Anything to add, Steve?
Yeah, I think if I could be a little bit controversial to the question there about thinking about what effect does min-till have on the seed population, actually probably the literal answer, it has no effect, and that is why you're doing it, because you don't want to have an effect on the seed population. And if we do other cultivation types, what we're doing, we're having a positive effect quite often from the blackgrass's perspective. In other words, we're getting it into a situation where it's more able to germinate and more able to grow. Whereas with min-till, you're either leaving it on the surface or you're leaving it buried. Now, that's not to say that it is always the best way in some situations, because sometimes actually, if you've had a big drop of seed, you may deliberately want to plough to bury that right down. But that's why Stu's talking about using this over a number of years to really get on top of your population. And yeah, Stu perhaps did take the easy way out on the technology question, but simply because that is the correct answer. I mean, we're asking there about what's just over the horizon, and certainly Luximo is the next development that will come into this area, and having a new mode of action is really exciting, I think. But what it isn't is a technology that will completely revolutionize what we're doing in terms of blackgrass control. It's a new mode of action. It's giving us high levels of kill than other residual type herbicides, but we must still remember everything we've learned and all the good practices we've learned around IPM, about rotational control, delayed drilling. So it's a refreshment of the technology in one sense, but it really is a new exciting change in another.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, guys. So we've got a couple of questions now. We've got a few more that we can answer as well. We've got plenty of time if there's anybody on the line. We've got one from Bruce that says, with mechanical weeding on broader widths now becoming available, is there, in your opinions, would harrowing before a herbicide application have a more beneficial effect on the blackgrass if it's unknown if the blackgrass is resistant?
My view on there is at the moment is no. We'll see if Steve disagrees with me, because what we know with the chemistry you have available to us, your soil residual chemistry you have available to us, which is part of this whole integrated approach, unless you're farming organically where you just want to use the mechanical means and all the cultural methods and absolutely no chemical at all. What we know with the soil residual chemistry is you must get it on pre-em. Give it the opportunity to hit that blackgrass in that pre-emergent situation, because that's where that chemistry is the most effective, and to get the best out of it and give it the biggest chance to kill the most blackgrass. Then what survives or what emerges through that's when other options like mechanical weeding will come into play as well. But to mechanical weed first and have some blackgrass that might have already germinated in the row, not in between the row, but alongside the crop, you're not then hitting that at the optimum time with the chemistry that you've got available to you. So that's sort of how I see that at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's probably a distinction between pre-em type herbicides and post-em contact herbicides. Stu's absolutely right. If you're using a pre-em, it really is best truly pre-em of the crop. So before you would do any mechanical weeding. If you're going early post-em with your mechanical weeding, there is a risk there as well that you'll break up the chemical layer. You'll disrupt that by doing your mechanical weeding going through. So that's something else to think about. But if you've got established blackgrass in there, then I would suggest that before using a contact material, giving a try with mechanical weeding may well be a good approach, because you're reducing the population that is exposed to that chemical from doing that. Of course, there will be weeds within the row that you're not able to control using a mechanical approach. So there still will be likely be a need for some contact material after that anyway. But just think about that. Think about the herbicides that you're talking about, and then the relationship to the weeding.
Great, thanks guys, really in-depth answers there. And to carry on this kind of theme, and we had these great questions from CG in our last webinar. They say more of a comment really to James, that the small robot's already taking blackgrass out in a post-emergent commercial wheat crop in Hampshire. If you missed earlier, I'm hoping they are dealing with brome here next year. So it's something something maybe to work alongside, or something to look out for in the future. So thank you for that, CG. And then the next question, and the last question that we've got, again guys, there's if you're still with us, there is still time for you to ask any questions. Question from Marianne: to what extent is resistant blackgrass spreading north and away from its traditional areas?
I'm trying to remember the maps, the latest maps that were done independently. I can't remember, it was mid-2000s, 2016, something like that. But it's spreading north. I think resistance populations are found in nearly all counties in the UK now, particularly where, you know, arable wheat is being grown. So, yeah, you've still got some pockets of soil types that blackgrass doesn't like on the very light sands and things like that. But actually, we're seeing blackgrass pretty much everywhere now. And again, you know, your independent institutes that are out there sampling blackgrass at this time of the year, they're sort of getting a very broad range of populations from all over the UK now. So it's pretty widespread.
Absolutely. Yeah, pretty well anywhere you can find it.
Yeah. So not necessarily just a regional issue anymore. Thanks guys. We don't have any questions on the line, but I'm just going to give people a couple more minutes, just in case there are any last minute ones coming through, and I'm going to ask one of my questions. And it really is just a general one. So if you've got resistance, if you've got an issue with resistance, or you suspect you've got an issue with resistance, blackgrass or ryegrass on your farm, what should you be doing? What are the first steps?
If you suspect it, you know, if you out there in your wheat fields now and you see blackgrass surviving, always collect the seed. Don't be worried that it might not actually be resistance. You know, there's a number of reasons why blackgrass could be in the field, and you know, the conditions that you were spraying in, clods breaking down, spring germinating blackgrass, and a lot of other things. So it might not necessarily actually be a resistance issue, the reason you have blackgrass in your fields at this time of the year. But there are a number of institutes now, IAB and ADAS, just to name two, that will do resistant testing for you. They want you to collect seed when the seed is dry and mature, it's normally in sort of July, early July time. They want about a coffee cup type sort of thing of seed and send it off to those guys, and they will give you a breakdown of your resistance status of your population, and that will then give you an indication of the sort of management techniques that you might want to take forward in managing that. You can also map, whether it's by hand, whether it's by just photographs, drones, or there are various tools out there now from other people to be able to sort of map your blackgrass. And so you start getting a record of where this blackgrass is, and you can correlate that to a resistance test and understand if you've got hotspots that are resistant, and then work at treating those, in a different way to how you may have been treating before in the past. And just getting as much info on what you're doing and how you're doing it, what maybe you can change to go forward if it does turn out that you've got resistance in your population. But we did a survey with ADAS back in 2019, and we were coming back to us that nearly 60% of the blackgrass populations that we sampled were showing resistance to all three mechanisms: non-target site, ALS and ACCA. So this sort of multi-resistant populations are quite common now.
Yeah. Anything to add, Steve?
I think Stuart made a really good point, particularly if you're in the early stages and you're really not sure where you've got resistance. Don't assume it is. I mean, I suspect there will be some resistance there, but actually, if you're getting poor control, it may be something that's more in your control, something you're more able to deal with. So make sure you get your good practice correct, your sprayers set up correctly, and you're using products appropriately. And I think the other thing is, even if you've only got blackgrass at a low level, real attention to detail. Don't tolerate it at all. I think that would be a lesson that people would share who've got more experience of blackgrass. And just seek help. There's just so much information out there, good information out there. Don't wait for it to build up. If it's just creeping into your farm now, then really jump on it. Get on top of it as early as you can.
Great, thank you. And then I'm just going to finish off with one last question, I think. We've got no more on the line. And I like to leave things on a positive note. It's not all doom and gloom, is it? So what success stories, if any, do we know of that we can learn from in the future when it comes to resistance management?
I think I hinted on it earlier, Ali. Speaking to a number of growers, being out and about, looking at blackgrass and herbicide trials, and there's a number of growers who feel that they're getting on top of the situation. They've got a very, very strict zero tolerance approach. It might seem over the top to some people, but actually that zero tolerance approach that they have is really paying dividends for them, and they've turned fields and farms around because of that. It's not a quick thing to do. It has taken them time, and it's taken a lot of hard work and effort to do it. But actually, they're beginning to reap the benefits of that type of approach now.
I think that's the point, Stuart. In that there is proven approaches. Other people have gone ahead and done this and shown it can be done. Whilst a few years ago, if you had a group of growers in the East or the Midlands, you asked them what their main issue was, it was always blackgrass. A lot of these growers now have a lot of confidence that they can get on top of their blackgrass and they can manage it effectively. So there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not suggesting they'll get to the point where they can forget about blackgrass, but it becomes just another management issue on the farm rather than the thing that's driving every decision they make, because they've started to get on top of the issue. So yeah, you're right, Ali, there is good news there for sure.
Absolutely. No more questions there. So just like to thank you both, Steve and Stuart, for joining us. But a special thank you to everybody who's taken time out of this beautiful sunny day to listen to us talk about resistance management. And if there are any more questions, both Steve and Stuart and myself are all on Twitter, and I'm sure that they would welcome any further questions that you might have. But that's it from us today. So again, thanks ever so much for joining us, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's the end of today's session. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you found it useful and informative. To find out more and to sign up to take part in any of the live sessions, visit the Arable Weed Week Hub at www.croptechshow.com/Arable Weed Week.